Joining me now is the author of The Indiana Clones Diary, an indispensable guide to the best big screen Raiders ripoffs. That is a mouthful, but I love every word of that. John Harrison.
Thanks, Joe. Good to be here. Appreciate the invite and had a couple of listens to some episodes. So, yeah, you really know your stuff. So, good to be here.
Appreciate it. Look, one of the previous segments we've done on the IndyCast is like the Indiana Clones. So, so you've written a book now, the Indiana Clones Diary. I guess this is the official version that we have. How would you define Indiana Clones for people that don't like? I kind of defined it in one way, but how would you define like Indiana Clones? Because there's adventure movies going back to Charlton Heston that are inspiring, but Indiana
Absolutely.
Clones
Yeah.
is kind of a different thing, right?
It is. It's such a huge bracket as well, and as a lot of people have said to me, and as I was aware of when I was putting the book together, some of these films are based on stories and characters that were around long before Indiana Jones was came onto our screen. Like the Alan Quatermain movies,
Right.
whereas even though they were
The
based on
ones, but
characters.
not the Richard Chamberlain ones, the early 50s, right?
That's
You
correct,
refer
yeah. But
right,
also,
right.
the Richard Chamberlain ones from the 80s, even
Yeah.
though the character was based on someone that came well before Indiana Jones, the Richard Chamberlain movies were clearly inspired by the success of the Indiana Jones. So,
That's an
in a
Indiana
way,
clone.
one inspired the other. That's correct, yeah. But I think, yeah, you're right. It is a very wide bracket, and there were a lot of films that I was sort of cut between. Do I include this one or do I include that one?
Yeah.
Some of that depended on whether or not there was enough illustrative material to go in the booklet with it, and
That's true.
whether we like a corresponding trailer to be able to put on the trailer reeler that comes with the Blu-ray. But look, I mean, I kept it pretty wide open. I mean, obviously, I think if you watch any movies from the 80s, it's pretty obvious which ones were inspired by Indiana Jones, whether you hear it in the music theme or in the look of the lead character or in the storyline, whether it was a period piece. And, I think just as, say a Friday the 13th clone or a Porky's clone, those teen sex comedies and the slasher movies from the 80s, one of those
Yeah.
straight away, you kind of know an Indiana clone straight away as well.
I think that's the key, and you tapped into it, is like the 80s, because it's like even when they were making Raiders, they weren't sure if it was going to do anything, right? And then all of a sudden it just blew up and took over the world. So at that point, Hollywood goes into overdrive. How can we look, if you want to say homage, if you want to say emulate, I like the fact that you just went with ripoff. I think that's brilliant. But those are the ones kind of we're talking about, the Richard Chamberlain, Alan Quatermain. But we want to mention, so you mentioned the trailers. So on the Blu-ray set for Sky Pirates, so we've got it here. This is the collector's edition. The artwork is fantastic. I'd never seen Sky Pirates before, so this is pretty cool. It comes also with like these lobby cards, like a whole set of lobby
Yeah.
cards. The artwork is great. And then I think the biggest key is this book. And you mentioned these trailers. So on the Blu-ray, you've got all these trailers for these Indiana Clones movies, so you can kind of see what they're all about. But this book is just fantastic. How did you get well, let's go back a little bit before that. So there's the plug. We got that. But I want to go back a little bit on, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see your nerd layer is completely tricked out. Obviously, you're a huge pop culture fan, a huge sci-fi fan, a huge action adventure fan, Planet of the Apes and all that. What were your inspirations growing up, and how did you get into writing?
Yeah, look, I grew up sort of came of age during that sort of classic period of the late 70s, early 80s when I was a young teen. So I was around when, all those formative movies like Star Wars and Alien, Close Encounters, Superman. And I was probably 16 when Raiders came out. So certainly, the right age to really be into it. And, that was a time when we didn't have as many choices into what we can watch, with streaming and so many digital channels and Blu-rays and that. So a movie like Raiders of the Lost Ark was one of those just big event movies where if you like films, it was just natural that you would go along to see it.
And it was
And
there all
you know,
year. It never left.
it was there all, yeah, yeah. You didn't have like, like I remember like, a year later you'd see ads, 12th big month, whereas now it's, maybe in cinemas for a month and then it's on Blu-ray. And even the new one, I haven't seen as yet because it came and went before I had a chance to, but
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing it though. I usually wait. We've got a great big cinema up here that's like a 1930s Art Deco with a giant
Yeah.
70 millimeter screen. So they'll bring it up and I'll catch it there, which is a
You'll
great
like it.
atmosphere.
You'll like it. It's enjoyable.
But yeah, look, obviously, I got a little bit Indiana Jonesed out while I was working on the booklet, and that's when the new movie was sort of in development as well, or on the way. So, I did sort of pack a lot in. So I think by the time the new movie did come out, I was maybe a little bit over seeing so many of them. So I thought, oh, I don't want to see it straight away. I'll maybe just give it a little bit of time. But
Yeah.
again, I grew up just loving, all kinds of sci-fi, horror, adventure, as you mentioned earlier. Planet of the Apes was a big influence. And then Star Wars I kind of liked, although I was more into James Bond. My dad sort of took me to see Star Wars when everyone was going to see it, and it was sold out. My typical dad would always turn up, just 10 minutes before the screening, thinking we could get a ticket. And there was like lines around the block for Star Wars, and it was going to be about at least 3 showings before we'd be in line for a ticket. So my dad said,
Dad
"Oh,
didn't watch
forget
much
that.
television, did he? He did.
No, no, no." Not unless the horse races was on, or
That's
the
fair.
football, but
That's fair.
yeah, he said we're not waiting around 8 hours. We'll go and see what's playing next door, which was the then new James Bond movie, The Spy Who Loved Me, and I
Oh
went and
yeah.
saw that, and I absolutely loved it. I came out of that and I was like, wow, that's fantastic. So that really made me fall in love with James Bond. And
Okay.
while all my friends were going back to see Star Wars every weekend, I was going to see The Spy Who Loved Me. I did see Star Wars eventually and really enjoyed it, of course. But yeah, it wasn't sort of one of those movies like for a lot of kids my age, it was like one of the touchstones. Whereas for me, it was just like another sort of big movie from my childhood. But Alien was, probably my own Star Wars, I guess,
Okay.
in terms of like sci-fi.
And how'd you transition into writing then? What was the interest in writing? Were you inspired by
Writing just
something?
sort of came a little bit sort of later on. When I was actually like studying at college. I was studying psychology and sociology and doing a also like a side course in media studies. And one of the I guess the assignments we had was we had to write a film or television review. And I decided to write a film review. Die Hard 2, I think it was the latest movie that was showing at the cinema. And
Why
I
not?
wrote a review. And my media teacher really liked it and said, you've got really good insight and good way you write. And he got that through his connections. He got that like published in the local paper. And,
Okay.
and I think that really sort of clicked with me. And I thought back to when I was a kid and at school, I used to have like a few assignments where whenever they would say, hey, just write an assignment on whatever you want. And I would always write an assignment on, horror movie stars. And I would always, go way over the word minimum word limit. So things like that. So I think, that sort of finally clicked that, hey, I think I found something that I really like that I can
Okay.
be creative at and, that I've been good at. So, it's sort of, I was in my mid-20s before I started writing, but yeah, I think I finally found my niche then.
I'm guessing inspired by like Fangoria and those types of
Yeah,
like
I
that's
read,
all we had. That was the internet back then, Starlog and like all those kind of things.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, grew up loving Famous Monsters of Filmland was a big
Mhm.
influence, and as you said, Starlog, and then Fangoria, and
Yeah.
then in the 80s and the 90s, some of the fanzines that came along that sort of devoted to more low budget exploitation cinema, like Psychotronic Video, and through that Psychotronic Video especially was like a big influence because that would not only cover the obscure horror stuff, but also go into things like 60s, LSD movies and low budget biker movies and beach party movies, and just really sort of opened me up to that whole world of cinema and
Yeah.
how many of them were so related in terms of, the people behind the scenes or the actors that appeared in so many genres.
I'm guessing you're a fan of Mystery Science Theater 3000 then probably you groove on some of those
We
or is it?
not a because we never had it over here, or I never really had it
Oh,
over
okay.
here.
That was that more of a
We
states
had
thing? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Like I've caught up with it over the years now,
Yeah.
over the internet. But yeah, because it wasn't sort of there as a big sort of influence at the time, it kind of like passed me by. We did have something
Okay.
similar in Australia Australia back in the 80s and 90s. But yeah, for me as well, I'm kind of like more, I like the movies just as they are,
Oh, okay, purist. Well, no, I know sometimes people think like when they're riffing on it, it's, sacrilegious or something, because when you really like that. So there's always a conversation to be had. Like, is it a love letter to them? Is it sacrilegious? So it's
yeah.
interesting to get
I know, yeah,
that
look,
take
I've
on it.
got friends that really enjoy it and
Yeah.
go along to those sorts of things. I guess I'm kind of like a little bit of a purist in that I don't sort of, get cranky or anything at it. But, for me, it's like, I'd be more impressed if they took like a movie like, say, The Godfather and managed to, make fun of that. Like sometimes it's easy to like make jokes at a film's expense when the
Low hanging
effects and
fruit.
the acting in that is obviously easy targets as such. But
Yeah.
ultimately, all films have a lot of work put into it, and they deserve that. But then a lot of filmmakers love the mystery science theater versions of their
Yeah.
films as well.
Well, you should
They
hear
sort of
our
get off.
commentaries. You should hear our IndyCast Indiana Jones commentaries because we feel like we've earned the right to sort of take them apart a little bit. So we do a
Yeah.
little digging. We do a little digging on it. Sky Pirates, was that like the Aussie version of Raiders? Is like how is that looked at in Australia? Or is it looked at
Yeah,
as sort of
definitely. I
like an
mean,
Indiana? Okay.
absolutely. I mean, even in the trailer, it starts off with saying, the Ark has been raided, so it was clear from the
The
start
stone
that,
has been romanced or whatever,
the
right?
stone has been raided. So yeah, it was obviously, where you were going with the movie, and it had that same sort of World War II setting, and it also had that little bit of kind of like a supernatural element to it as
Yeah.
well. So it was obviously clearly riffing. But yeah, the 1980s and the late 70s in Australia, there was like a big renaissance of like genre cinema. There was a lot of horror cinema and a lot of we never really got a big sci-fi industry here at the time. But yeah, action, adventure, and Raiders of Sky Pirates was just one of those movies produced by a guy called John Lamond, who was pretty famous for anything that was kind of popular. He would be willing to do like his own sort of riff on. And I guess Sky Pirates was one of those ones that is sort of definitely an Aussie movie, but also one that they try to make, more international in appeal. And sometimes, it didn't work with some of John Lamond's films.
Yeah.
Sometimes they would be set in America, but they were obviously, Australian accents, and that gave them sort of weird tones. But I think a lot of his films, he didn't want them to be, identifiably Australian, just in order to appeal to a more international market. Because
Well, I
really in
noticed.
Australia, there was like two types of cinema. There was like the retro cinema that was looking at Australia's past, and it was kind of like that whole new wave of Australian cinema, Picnic at Hanging Rock and Newsfront, movies like that. And then you had our low budget exploitation industry, and that was where people like John Lamond, who made Sky Pirates, and Anthony Igonane really sort of made their mark.
Okay. Well, I noticed that about Sky Pirates too, because it's like, it's definitely Australian, but it doesn't feel like it because Indiana Jones is definitely American, but he goes to so many places. He has
Mm,
friends in every part of the world, and it felt like Dakota Harris. It's Dakota Harris, right? That's the yeah, the alternate name of. But it felt like they're in the Bermuda Triangle, they're in Stonehenge, they're in like all these different places, and it's not like he's just like in the outback. It's not like Crocodile Dundee or something
that's
like
right.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's
yeah.
not playing, the
The
Men at Work,
tropes.
Olivia John sort of Australian image of the 80s. There's
Right.
kangaroos
He's not putting
playing or
Vegemite on sandwiches and stuff.
yeah.
Right, right. Was it called Dakota Harris there? Or like
Oh
where
no, it
does
was
that
called Sky Pirates here. Yeah, I think it was called
okay.
Dakota Harriets in some other parts of the world, but yeah, it was
Okay.
always Sky out here. Yeah.
Because they never say his full name. I don't think they call him Dakota in the film, but I think it's called. I like that's how we know. So,
Yeah.
I thought it was a cool adventure. Yeah, it's a little silly at times. But this book, let's talk about so that's part of the set of Sky Pirates. So people got to get the collector's edition so they can get the book. But let's talk a little bit about these things. The artwork, I just love the fact that you've included all the artwork. The one I haven't seen, Race for the Yankee Zephyr, horrible title, but I
Yeah.
saw the trailer and I thought, oh man, is this the one with the helicopter, right? And it's going all over the place. And I'm like, oh, you can't CG in it, like, because we know from back in the day, you either had a helicopter or you didn't. And this thing is like flying like crazy over it. I thought, you know what? I think I might need to see Race for the Yankees effort. Again, horrible title, but Ken Wall's in it, Leslie Ann Warren,
Well,
Donald
yep.
Pleasance. I mean, what more do you
Donald
want?
Pleasance, yep.
Is it a good one?
Yeah, I mean, it is a good one. Yeah, it was
All right.
a fairly big budget movie. I think it was maybe one of the bigger budget Australian
Mhm.
movies at the time. And I think it was initially meant to be set in Queensland, Australia, before they
Oh,
got like a tax break if they went and filmed it in New Zealand. So they did have to do some last minute rewrites on it, which maybe sort of didn't help in terms of the film's storyline.
okay.
Seems a little bit rushed because it was actually set in Queensland and based on a true story, I believe, of an American plane that crashed off the Queensland coast during World
Okay.
War II, because a lot of the American Air Force would train up there. But it was a good big movie for its day. Again, Australia's film industry was fairly low budget, so anything back then that may have cost anything over $1 million was considered a big budget Australian movie. So definitely
Yeah.
they got a lot of a lot of like publicity out of big movies like this. Although as with Sky Pirates, Yankees Zephyr didn't really do very well at the cinema. I think by the time they came along, that really golden period of Australian exploitation and low budget filmmaking had maybe peaked, and there were so many other films coming in. So a lot of these films did do their best business on home video.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of this was like more like the action sequences are amazing. Like you said, maybe the storyline, and even in Sky Pirates too. But although, like you mentioned, like this based on a true story or parts of it, like even Sky Pirates, I think part of it was based on the Philadelphia experiment too, right? Like what, like
That's
they
correct. Yeah,
incorporate a
you
little
can
bit of
definitely
that in.
see that.
So it's nice
Yeah,
that they
you
dip
can
those
definitely.
toes in. Ones we're familiar with, definitely High Road to China. Obviously, Tom Selleck, the original Indiana Jones, got his shot. Is in here.
Yeah.
Firewalker with Chuck Norris. I love that you included that. Romancing the Stone, Jewel of the Nile. We know those are the big budget ones. I love the fact that you've included one of my favorite titles of any film in cinema history, The Perils of Gwendolyn and the Land of the Yik Yak. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I
for
mean, there was
people who
some.
aren't familiar with that, what can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, I mean that was one of the ones. There was some when I was offered the job of doing the book. We sort of got together with. Oh, I got together with Mark Hartley, who is one of the people that work at Umbrella, and he was responsible for putting this particular release together. So he certainly deserves quite a bit of the kudos for illustrating the booklet as well.
It's
So there were
amazing.
some titles that I said, try and include these ones. And then there were some that I said, I really want to include these. And yeah, the booklet is really beautiful looking. So Perils of Gwendolyn was one of the ones that he sort of suggested that we include. It's maybe one that I probably wouldn't have thought of straight away. It doesn't seem like an obvious Indiana Jones
Oh,
clone, but
the artwork,
rewatching
though.
it, definitely. Oh yeah, you can tell by the artwork where it's going.
Yeah,
But it's the poor lady that just recently passed away, Tawny Katane,
yeah.
as
Like, what was a White Snake video vixen, and she was in Bachelor
that's
Party,
correct. Yeah,
right? People we know from that, right, right, right. It
an
was always on like
episode of
HBO. It seemed like it was on HBO like all the time.
It was, and it was pretty. Like I remember at the time, a lot of magazines and that covered it, mainly because of the titillation aspect. I mean, it's a very highly sexual film, but also got some pretty amazing sets as well. And I think that's one of the interesting things about it. It does have a nice production design, and it has become a bit of a cult camp classic. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that I did include it, and it was good to just have a couple of female centric and female led movies as well to cover like that, and Yellow Hair.
Yellow Hair, yeah, it's combined with that Yellow Hair and the Fortress of Gold. That
Yeah,
was 1984. So you can combine it. Like everybody was doing. I mean, even TV was doing it with Tales of the Gold Monkey and Bring 'Em Back
yeah.
Alive. I think with Bruce Boxleitner, we've talked about that on the show. Man, there's so many here. Obviously, Sky Pirates, Dakota Harris, Jake Speed. We've talked about that on the show. I always thought the artwork for Jake Speed. Are you familiar with Taxi, Judd Hirsch?
Oh, yep, yep.
Did you? Am I the only one that thinks he looks like Judd Hirsch from Taxi? I don't know. I could be wrong.
Not a
Jake
name I would
Speed.
have initially thought of, but yeah.
Oh, so what's Judd Hirsch doing in an Indiana Jones movie? It was Jake Speed, and I'm like, oh, and then I saw it. Do you have a favorite
Jake
River
Speed
of
was a good
Deaths?
one.
What's that?
I like Jake Speed because it also I like Jake Speed because it also
Yeah,
had that pulp element as well, based on it
yeah,
being, a back pulp hero, kind of like, I guess, with Romancing the Stone as well, where it was based on, the adventure character that the Kathleen Turner character has created for her books, and I kind
yeah.
of like that juxtaposition between when fiction and reality meet, and being a big fan of vintage pulp paperbacks as well, I kind of enjoyed that angle to it.
Well, it was so brilliant too, because the late '80s, early '90s, obviously we had like the Phantom, the Shadow, and
Mhm.
Rocketeer is probably the biggest example too. We've talked
Yeah.
about that a lot. It's like, but it's like those like Raiders struck a nerve. I think Romancing the Stone tapped into that because they did. It was more like a modern take on it. It was a modern take. But it's like all these other ones, sort of like that throwback to yesteryear never really tapped in. Even like, you see things like the Lone Ranger and all these like pulp heroes and different things like that, the Shadow, and we talk about, but it's like they never click as well as the Raiders did. And I don't know, what do you attribute that to? Is it just the genius of the John Williams, Harrison Ford, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, right? That'll never happen again, ever.
I think that's it is a pretty magic combination. I think when you get any of those together, it's always going to
Yeah.
create some sort of magic. And I think the three of them combined, and also plus they were obviously, even though what they were doing was just redeveloping or reinterpreting what had come in the past, it still seemed very fresh and new.
Yeah.
And being perceived as the first, for a lot of kids back in 1981, this would have been the first time they would have seen or heard of this kind of cliffhanger type superhero, and I think also the fact that Harrison Ford was so well known as
Yeah.
Han Solo at the time helped. And, as I mentioned earlier, if you're a film fan back then, anything with Spielberg or Lucas attached was automatically like, we need to see it straight away, and
Yeah, it
put
was
them both
gold.
together. It's pretty much
Well, that was the
magic.
poster too. I don't even know if it's the no, it's not the poster behind me, but it was the original one. It was like, from the creators of Jaws and Star Wars. It's like, how
Hmm.
often do you have the director and the producer, and the writer, like that's the poster?
Yeah,
Because I
that's
remember
beautiful.
even going to the theater and it's like, oh yeah, that's all I need. Like I'm good. It's Han
Yeah.
Solo, it's Star Wars, it's I'm
All
good
I
to
need
go.
to add
Whatever.
of this is, and the producer of The Godfather or The Exorcist, and that would have, maybe made it a bit bigger. But,
Exactly.
but going
Do
back
you
to Rocketeer, though, I was a bit disappointed that I couldn't include that one because it came out in 1990, I believe, and I was sort of
okay.
stuck to the 1980s for the booklet. So, I
So
was a little
was
bit
that
disappointed.
the parameter for the Indiana
Yeah, that was
Jones
the
Diary, was
parameter
the
that, yeah,
80s?
they needed
Okay.
to, yeah, come out.
That's fair.
After Raiders and prior to 1980. So yeah, it was otherwise, I'd probably still be writing it.
Yeah, well, it's true. And that
Um,
because you had like what Jungle Cruise, I think, with The Rock, and you got the Tomb
yeah,
Raider
that's it.
films.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah,
but I think it's a brilliant, I think it's a brilliant snapshot of the 80s of what we all like were looking for, and just like we're jonesing for it, no pun intended, but to try
yeah.
to get more Indiana Jones. Do you have a favorite Indiana clone? I mean, Sky Pirates, I guess, is the one, right? It gets you
My
your
pirates I
your,
really like,
your
and
bread and butter.
I do like. I do love, obviously, the two Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas movies. They were, as you said earlier, they were like a step above in terms of, production and class. They were, and plus, I think they also had like a genuine sense of romance, and Danny DeVito really elevated them. So I think that's one of my favorites in terms of like the bigger budget ones. In terms of like some of the lower budgeted ones, I guess one of the ones I do love is Jungle Raiders, which was like a 1985 film directed by Antonio Margheriti, who was like a fairly well-known Italian exploitation filmmaker. And I think the things I like about the Italian Raiders rip-offs is they also tend to riff on those Italian jungle cannibal movies of the
Oh yeah,
70s
yeah.
that were popular as well. So they kind of combine that as well. And Jungle Raiders, I think one of the reasons I love it as well is there's a little kid in it that has like a pet cobra that he and this kid sort of sends his pet cobra on reconnaissance missions, and the cobra sort of sneaks into advanced rooms and spies around, then comes back and reports to the kid by like bowing his little head, and I think the kid sort of sends him off to like take care of the guards as well. So
Nice.
I think it just sort of creates a real sort of a strange, surreal sort of element to it. Just seeing this kid and his pet cobra conversing.
I've got so much. I mean, I haven't heard of a lot of these. That's why I love having them all in one compact little digest, because now I got to figure out how to get them, because it's like I don't know if they're streaming. I don't,
Yeah, look,
um,
some of them you can probably find. I mean, these days with
probably on
so
YouTube.
many boutique Blu-ray labels and that, just about any obscure movie is out there. But
Yeah,
yeah, some of them are also available on YouTube just to watch, and not all of them I had at hand. So, a couple of them I had to rely on just seeing some pretty, dodgy looking online copies. But
yeah.
sometimes with some of these lower budget movies, a bit of grime and a few sort of scratches and that on the films kind of adds to the effect in a way.
I agree. I agree that I don't need to have the most pristine copy. I love the fact that this is on Blu-ray now, this guy, because it looks amazing.
Yeah,
But yeah, to enjoy something like that, sometimes you just kick back and have a whiskey and just enjoy the evening.
that's it. Just yeah,
What
just
what
let
do you got coming
go.
out next? You got
Um,
a Kiss book? Is it the
Yeah,
rock
well,
group?
I do sort of my regular stuff for Umbrella Entertainment, who put out the Sky Pirates, and that's out in two editions. There's obviously the limited one that has the booklet and the cards, and that's available on the website. But there's also like just the standard edition that just has the movie as well as the trailer
Yeah,
reel and that. So
because this one's going to
that's out
sell
there.
out. This one
Yeah, they
by the time
do
this
sell
airs,
out.
they usually sell out pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's maybe about 300 of the limited ones. So
Mhm.
yeah, definitely not many. So coming up next for them, I've got doing some work for Red Rock West, which is a 90s sort of film noir by John Dahl that starred Nicolas Cage and Lara Finn Boyle and Dennis Hopper. So doing a video essay for that one, which is a little
Okay.
bit different, as well as writing a booklet for it on 90s film noir movies. But yeah, my main work at the moment is doing a book on Kiss in terms of their appearances on film and television over the years, as well as also the influence that they had. So looking more at the like with the Indiana Clones, looking at kind of the Kiss rip-offs where you had episodes of the Incredible Hulk and
Yeah,
Chips,
that's right.
the Love Boat, where characters would play Kiss like rock stars. Like there's the Love Boat
Yeah.
episode where Sonny Bono plays Deacon Dark, and there's a Chips episode where the guy who plays Ralph Malph on Happy Days plays a Kiss like rock star called
Donnie
Moloch.
Most. I forgot about those.
So it kind of like looking at the official stuff as well as all the the low budget sort of homages and rip-offs as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, about 3/4 of the way through that. So that's keeping
Did
me
you
pretty busy.
interview the Kiss band members? Did you get the chance to meet them or talk
No,
to
I've been
them or Zoom with
not
them?
as
Or
yet, but they are coming out to Australia next month to do like supposedly their final gig out here,
right?
as well as um, the local grand final football. So I'm going to try and get through, but it is pretty tough to get hold of them, unfortunately,
Okay.
especially if you don't want to pay money for the privilege. But
Yeah.
because it's more
Well, you're
about
working.
movies
Yeah.
as
I mean,
well.
it's right. You're working. You should get paid for it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but it is something that it's more about the movies themselves. So I have been able to contact some of the people involved in the movies, and I've spoken to Kiss's business manager at the time,
Okay.
that was like their manager during the 70s. So he had a lot of good stories about their work on the Paul Lynde Halloween special in 1976 and their famous TV movie that they did in the 70s, Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, which
That was with the roller coaster thing, and they're down in
that's it.
the
Yeah.
bowels of the amusement
Yeah,
park. And
the
I
guy
remember
creates
that.
the robotic clones, and yeah,
Yes, the
wasn't
Kiss
their
clone.
best moment. And
No, but
I
I
mean,
but
it
I
looked.
love that. And I think but we look back at that fondly now. I think in the moment maybe it was like maybe it was a misstep. But we look back on that now, and I just when you said that, I
Oh,
was
of
like,
course,
yep,
yeah.
I gotta see it.
Because at the time, yeah, a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, Kiss have killed their career with this thing," and it really
Yeah.
did. It really didn't help their career at all, But now, as you said, from the vantage point of like 40 something years later, and we
Yeah.
know the Kiss have survived and thrived, you can sort of look back on that and say, yeah, that was a lot of fun, so
They're
what, it was.
touring Australia apparently, so I don't think they're hurting for anything 40 years
No, that's
later.
it. Yeah, and I'm sure they've done well. I mean, they themselves, when I talked to their business manager, he said they were like so embarrassed by it at the start. They were like
Yeah.
hiding in their seats during a preview, and for a few years afterwards, no one in the KISS organization was even allowed to, mention it in their
Yeah.
presence. Whereas at least now they've got a bit of a sense of humor about it. Gene will always say, "Oh, we made our own Plan 9 from outer space," and has a bit of a laugh, but
Yeah. Well, it's
it's
kind of
a
like
lot
the
of
Star
fun.
Wars holiday special. It's like at the time it was like George Lucas couldn't get
Yeah.
rid of it fast enough, but now it's like we're all like clamoring, like we want it on 4K, we want it or whatever, like whatever version. And it's like it's just we want our childhood back.
I know, yeah. Yeah, that was a real mind blower. I remember seeing that on TV as a kid, and
Yeah,
what the heck is this thing?
I
But
loved
Kiss
it.
Meets
I
the
thought,
Fisherman's Park. I mean, we ended up, it actually got released to cinemas out here, so people had to pay to see it, in Australia.
wow,
But it
wow,
did really well because Kiss at that time, even though they'd died out in America, they were like huge over here.
yeah.
The movie was like playing for almost 2 years straight out here, the Kiss movie, it was.
Yeah. G knew how to market. He's a master marketer. Was it let's see, John-Harrison.blogspot.com. Is that where we go?
That's correct. Yeah, if you
All right.
anyone can go there, just check out my blog spot and see where updates on my writing and some samples and some
Yeah.
reviews and things like that. And also, they can find me on Facebook if they have a look. There should be a link there on the page.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, look, this is the one they want to get. This is the Indiana Clones diary. I mean, what more do you want? That's the best
It
thing.
wasn't
I
my
just love
title either. I'd actually called my book Raiders of the Ark's Art, which is the title that I gave on the Indy page.
I
Indiana
saw you
Clones
sneaked it in.
Mark Hartley's title, but it worked out well, I think, and I like the way they sort of made it look like an old leather-bound book.
It looks
But
like it
definitely,
belongs in Dr. Jones' satchel, right?
it's actual, yeah. But
Look,
no,
we
look at anyone who's an Indiana Jones fan. Would really enjoy both the movie and the booklet and the trailer reel as well. I think the
yeah.
trailer reel is a good primer to both watch, have it on the background as you're reading the book, and it also gives you an idea to watch and think, okay, that looks like one I might want to seek out and have a look at.
It made me want to see the Zephyr one, whatever that is. Horrible title, but I
Race
gotta
for
see it.
Unity,
So
Zephyr.
I gotta watch that one. I'm telling you what, John, thank you so much. This is a very cool item to add to our Indiana Jones collections. We got to run out and get that. I just love that it is forever tied to Sky Pirates. That's a very cool thing. So thank you for joining me today on the show. I truly appreciate it.
That's okay. No worries. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it, Joe.